The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone and welcome. Today's webinar is part of Cambashi's webinar series on evidence-based marketing planning. I'm Peter Thorne and joining me is my colleague Christine Easterfield. Marketing planning is a bridge. It connects company strategy to action. It's the set of processes that converts statements of strategies for the business as a whole into targets, activities, resources, plans, and priorities for organizational groups within the business. Today, Christine will take us through an example in a sensitive area, and that is resource allocation. Decisions and plans for sales and marketing headcounts and budgets may be based on last year's budget, or sometimes the discussion turns into a beauty parade where, as I think we all know, the unit with recent sales success, or a group that shouts the loudest, or the team that comes up with the best presentation, whoever wins the beauty parade gets priority and gets the resources they ask for. Evidence-based marketing planning is different. It's an approach that uses market data to evaluate alternatives in a consistent way. It provides a rational basis for decisions. So, in today's example, Christine will use market data to allocate sales and marketing headcount to match opportunity. We'll be using data from Cambashi's market observatories for this exercise, so I'll explain what these are, then I'll hand over to Christine, who will explain the scenario and develop a resource plan. We hope to have time at the end to answer questions, but if you have a question at any time, use the question panel to send it to us. And if we don't get to it today, we'll get back to you later. So, the Cambashi market observatories. These are data sets delivered as standard spreadsheets. We research the global market from different points of view, and the observatories provide consistent data for these multiple views of the market. The observatories fit into three groups. Technical application software, at the top here, is our core domain. Our example today is in this domain. We'll be looking at a software vendor selling technical application software. In the middle group, we maintain observatories covering economic data. These help set context and judge potential markets. Thirdly, in the bottom group, we treat specific areas as focused markets. So, technical applications. This is the software used by engineers, architects, manufacturing process designers, and others to support design and engineering, including creative activities. The four Tech Apps observatories provide different views of this software market. The employment and value-added observatories provide detail in the industry segments that we focus on. That's all segments that invest in technical application software. And for some markets, we drill down or we take a specific view. This includes tools for embedded software development, computer-aided manufacturing, CAM, and the digital simulation tools used for computer-aided engineering. The data comes from multiple sources, so we triangulate and improve the data. It's an iterative, refine, constrain, converge process. The result is consistent data and multiple views by product, by country, by industry, and combinations of these slices. Today, we're going to be using data from just one observatory, the Industry Observatory. Before we start, though, I need to say a word to keep the lawyers happy, a disclaimer. This is an imaginary scenario, and the data used here is only to illustrate that scenario. The numbers are Cambashi estimates, and of course the observatories are changing and developing all the time. Okay, so now I'll hand over to Christine to take us through today's scenario. Christine.
Thanks, Peter. So, let me explain the scenario. I'm going to assume that I'm part of a planning team for a software vendor that sells technical application software. It's my job to create a framework of market numbers that will allow all the stakeholders, product managers, industry leads, country managers, and so on, to contribute to the planning process in ways that connect together. So I'm hoping the numbers I provide will stimulate the stakeholders to think, discuss, and even be inspired about the future of the business. But the key point is a framework of numbers that is consistent across countries, industries, currencies and years, so that it can be trusted as a foundation on which to create plans. I appreciate that in a small company, once I've pulled together the framework, it may be me that uses it to develop the rest of the plan. And all these different roles are just different hats that I wear at different times. But whether I'm the only planner or part of a team, the goal is the same. Make sure that plans at every level fit together. Make sure the plan allocates resources in the best possible way. So I'm going to use the Cambashi market observatories, which cover the market I'm interested in, at a level of detail I can use to understand the market. As Peter said, I'll be using the industry observatory, so let's take a look at that first. We have 53 countries with 111 market sectors in each country. The observatory covers 9 years, both historic and forecast, and gives end-user expenditure in dollars, euros and local currency. So that's around 160,000 values, all money spent on technical applications. These are the numbers we'll be using to plan resources. But first, let's get an overview. Now, the volume of data here makes the individual labels of the rows and columns too small to read, but bear with me. I promise an interesting diagram in a moment, if you let me explain. This is a screen capture from Excel, based on a core data table from the Cambashi Industry Observatory. For Excel enthusiasts, this is from a straightforward pivot table created to summarize selected data. In this case, the data is for just 1 year. There's one row for each of the 53 countries in the observatory. The countries have been sorted according to our forecasted 2015 total spend on technical application software. With the largest at the top, we've got the US, Japan and Germany up there, and the smallest at the bottom, that's Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia. The colourful column on the right is the total for each country, with the standard heat map colouring, green for the largest and red for the smallest. On the horizontal axis, there's one column for each of the 111 vertical markets, and these are also sorted by total global spend in the industry, with the largest sectors on the right and the smallest on the left. We've got the same heat map colouring of the row of totals at the bottom. Green's big, go for it, red small, keep away. The values are invisible here, but each of the nearly 6,000 cells contains the 2015 market size calculated in US dollars. I don't want to look at the actual numbers, I'm just trying to get an overview of the global market. So here's an analysis using a simple conditional formatting showing the top 10% shaded green. It's no surprise to see a cluster of green in the top right-hand corner. That's where you'll find the largest verticals in the largest country markets. The outliers are more interesting. Moving down or left in this table, you're moving to smaller markets. For any of these to make it to the top 10%, there's got to be something interesting about them. I've picked out a couple from countries we'll be looking at later. So mining support service activities in Chile. Construction of roads and railways in Brazil. Both examples trigger thoughts about the economy. Commodities in Chile. The question of whether this spend by roads and railways construction in Brazil is just a blip triggered by the World Cup and the 2016 Olympics, or whether it's a long-term feature of the market. That sort of thing. You can imagine the planning team will focus on the countries and sectors they know about and look for opportunities, explanations and insights into the market. The vertical markets here are the lowest level definitions in the Industry Observatory. They match very closely the classifications defined by the ISIC 4 standard, though there are a couple where we've either aggregated or subdivided an ISIC 4 class to make it a better fit for our technical applications software market. Of course, I wouldn't usually recommend putting a set of nearly 6,000 numbers on one screen. It doesn't take long, though, to simplify this by aggregating the verticals into the higher level industry groups that your company probably uses, and select just the countries that are of interest to your audience. Last chart with unreadable text, I promise. But the fact that this granularity of data is included is an important part of what we're doing here. The blue bars are a single country view of the 2015 market size for the 111 industry sectors. In this case, it's Argentina. This is the data that was on a single row of the table we looked at just now, and it's just a different slice of the data. The observatory contains data for 9 years, so I've calculated the growth in 1 year, from 2014 to 2015, and shown as a percentage with these red dots. And I've ordered the sectors according to this 1 year growth rate, with the fastest growing sectors on the left. In reality, you wouldn't use this level of detail, but I wanted to show consistency with the world view. Most people get bogged down with this much data. So step 1 is to exclude the sectors you don't address from the 111. Then aggregate the rest into the vertical markets that your company uses. Between 5 and 10 verticals is typical. This selection and structuring is all part of your company's know-how, part of its focus. And of course, this understanding of the market may be a source of competitive advantage. With data for 111 sectors to start with, you should be able to map accurately to your company's 5 or 10 sectors of interest. To be consistent with the worldview, I've used US dollars here, but the Cambashi observatories also maintain what we call operational currencies, the currency usually used for IT transactions in each country, and with 40 currencies covering the 53 countries. Now this is the kind of data you'd share with a country manager, in this case, again, showing Argentina. This chart is based on the same size and growth data, but I've selected about 50 of the 111 sectors and grouped them according to the 5 sector definitions used by the imaginary company for which we're doing the planning. I should add a health warning here myself. The sector definitions are unique to this imaginary company, but that's typical. Your definitions of a sector like high tech is the one you should be using for planning, not someone else's. And I've used the operational currency information, Argentinian pesos, to plot the size of the market and calculate the growth rate for each sector. This is the kind of information that will allow the country manager to think about how to deploy resources. The goal, of course, is to allocate people and budget into the right areas, match direct sales, channel partners, and marketing initiatives to the opportunity. Country managers will add a lot of value with their knowledge of the buying cycle in the territory. The local buying culture will determine exact definition of roles and the way to organise the in-country team. The obvious question from this chart is whether or not the consumer goods opportunity is large enough to justify a viable in-country sales and marketing operation. This chart gives the country managers what they need for discussion with industry managers, or if you're the one-person planning team, to build up a picture of the opportunity. So there are options for consumer goods here, maybe a reseller operation, or maybe just order fulfillment, which would rely on sales made in other countries or online. Within Argentina, automotive is second only to machinery, but has the highest growth, so it will certainly be important in the plan. The critical point is that this is just one view of the same single data set, so the numbers you share with country managers will match the numbers you share with your industry managers. Here's the automotive data for the 6 countries in scope for this plan. We saw the automotive sector in Argentina on the previous slide, where it was one of the largest sectors with one of the larger growths. But in the context of the other countries, it has lower growth than some and a relatively small overall opportunity. So it's going to be hard for Argentina to be a special focus for the automotive initiatives. But the growth is high enough, and given the situation we saw for other sectors in Argentina, a set of automotive industry initiatives focused on growth would make sense in Argentina. Notice that we're looking at US dollars here, Of course, this is an accepted way of looking at country comparisons. The observatories handle consistent currency conversions, but of course, if exchange rates are varying a lot, then growth calculated in US dollars can be different from growth calculated in local currency. If you need the data for local currency, it's available, but it's one to watch. Let's move on to the resources. Here's one way of helping the planning team understand the market opportunity. I've selected the countries and the sectors relevant to this company. Again, it's the same data, just viewed in a different way. I've calculated the market size as a percentage. The total market size of the custom sectors in the countries of interest is 100%, and everything else is part of this 100%. The starting point, and that's all it is, it's unlikely resources will end up like this, but you can get started by considering a headcount allocation in proportion to the size of the opportunity. So let's say history and current thinking on budgets and headcounts mean you're expecting a total of 10 in-country sales and marketing heads. Then just by proportions, you might expect 4 or 5 in Brazil and 2 or 3 in Mexico. And you can see the overall totals for each sector. But this is only a starting point. You could compare this to the current distribution of heads. This may lead very rapidly to disagreements about who gains heads and who loses heads. You'll have to have this discussion eventually, but perhaps not until there's more evidence. There are plenty of good reasons why an optimum headcount allocation will be different to this. One is startup effects. It takes quite a few years to establish your business in a country or vertical. The numbers here tell you where the target is. But this is a steady state. The profile doesn't tell you how to get started in a market. This is where the way we do things around here, or recent experiences, and the approach of your senior sales and marketing people will all be significant. So let me give you a bit more detail on the scenario. For this business, Mexico, Portugal and Spain are the established markets, with Argentina and Chile being profitable at a low level. Business is handled through resellers, and one of this year's corporate objectives is to build on last year's creation of a direct sales operation in Brazil. As a result, there's a ring-fenced corporate budget for Brazil, so we can plan our 10 heads across the other 5 countries. Now, I expect you remember our global overview, where we started with one of the global anomalies being mining support service activities in Chile. It was in the top 10% of technical application software markets, even though globally this is a smallish sector and Chile is a smallish country market. So this 1% figure should trigger some questions. Does this include mining support services? And the answer in this custom definition is no. This in turn should trigger some action. For example, to pick up the phone and ask our reseller in Chile about the scope of companies they target in the machinery sector. Are the mining service companies significant? Do we visit them? Do we go to the same trade shows and so on? The important point is that the numbers can trigger this sort of action and can help the people who drive the business to see all the opportunities. Alternatively, if I'm the company accountant, I might wonder why we are even concerned with Chile at all, as it's only 2% of the overall market. But on the next slide, we'll see a different view of the data that tells us why Chile should be interesting to us. Here are the growth figures. This is 2015 growth over 2014 for the same selected countries and the same custom sectors, but with the growth calculated from the local operational currency, which is usually the better indicator of local market conditions. And here you can see why Chile is interesting. It's small, but also the fastest growing in all verticals. The person responsible for sales in Chile will want to sales and resource marketing support, sales and marketing resource tuned to new opportunities. In contrast, the situation in Portugal is different. Automotive is shrinking, and there's not much growth in consumer goods. In fact, it has the lowest growth in 4 of those 5 sectors. So the priority for Portugal will be more defensive. For example, sales and marketing initiatives designed to extend the footprint in existing accounts. From the point of view of the automotive market, leaving aside Chile, which we talked about, and Brazil, which has its corporate initiative, it looks as if it will be hard for automotive to help Portugal much. Automotive should probably concentrate on the good growth in Mexico and Spain, which you remember are the established markets for this company. And given a company-level initiative to get established in Brazil, it would make sense for the head of automotive to tap into any corporate budgets that have been ring-fenced for Brazil and point to the size and growth of automotive in Brazil as a reason for using corporate money on automotive initiatives. There's a story and a response behind each of these growth numbers. Here's an example for machinery in Portugal. It's the sector with the leading growth in Portugal, so perhaps it's the one to focus on. But the growth figures on their own aren't enough. You need to look at market size figures at the same time. So here we're going to put the market size along the horizontal axis and the 2015 growth on the vertical axis. Here are the figures from the tables we looked at. In this chart, the symbols show the vertical market, aerospace, automotive, and so on, but you can't see which country. Here's the same data, the same set of marker positions, but the markers now represent the country, and the vertical market's no longer visible. Of course, you could make the chart more elaborate. You could label the markers to show the country and the sector at the same time. But in many planning teams, you'll force a better discussion of strategy if you make the data anonymous. So this is the anonymous view of the same information. And it's harder for any preconceptions about country or vertical opportunity to influence the thinking. I'm going to use this chart to do a visual classification of the various types of market we might want to treat differently. For example, here are the large and fast-growing markets. And here are the small but fast-growing markets. And these are markets that are quite small and also have slow growth, so they might need individual attention. So we've got 3 types of market that may need 3 different handling. Here are the same classifications shown in the table form we used earlier, with country and industry now visible. It's easy to see why there's a corporate drive in Brazil with all those green sectors, and the consumer goods and the Portuguese office will face the greatest challenges. And it could affect the resource allocation either way, adding resource to improve the situation or deciding to withdraw from that market altogether. Now I can add back the market size percentages to explicitly show the relative proportions. And now we have to try and pull all this together. Remember that in this scenario, the corporate initiative to get started in Brazil means we've got a branch office there with 5 sales and marketing heads in place as part of the corporate Brazil launch strategy. We don't have to justify them in the budget, just point them to the right industries. So if Brazil already has 5 heads, covering its 55% of the market, this means our budgeted 10 heads must cover the remaining 45% of the market. So doing the calculations, we get 3 heads in Spain, 1 dedicated to automotive, 1 dedicated to machinery, and the 3rd handling the rest. You also get 3 heads in Mexico, 2 on automotive, the 3rd handling the other sectors. In both these countries, Mexico and Spain, there's the security of 1 or 2 large and fast-growing segments, the ones shown in green. Because Chile has such fast growth, you may decide to justify 1 dedicated person, but not the overheads of a local office. This would probably depend on corporate strategies. Given these numbers, it looks as if a head office person with a budget to recruit, train and support resellers in Chile could be a reasonable approach. So that covers all the fast-growing markets, both large and small. But the pattern of markets that need attention, the red ones, forces you to think long and hard about business in Portugal and about your activities in the consumer goods sectors. Let's assume you want to stay in Portugal. We might propose one person for Portugal to focus on machinery only. That leaves two heads to cover Argentina. But there's not much to justify them spending time on consumer goods. It looks as though the consumer goods sector will have to rely on the corporate initiative in Brazil. So this means we've got an initial answer to the headcount question. Of course, this is just a first step. There's still discussion about budgets, about whether you need people in country or if some of these roles should be head office industry specialists. But the point is, you're using the market data to encourage evidence-based decisions. Let's recap the data that will guide this planning process. First, we looked at the global overview, 53 countries in 111 industries. Then we were able to support the country managers with charts of their countries. We sliced the data by industry so we could see each country of interest in each industry. And we got the discussion of resources going by looking at size and growth tables. We combined these so the team could classify the segments. And for this plan, we picked out the large and fast-growing segments, the small but faster growing, and the segments that needed attention. Putting all that back into our size table, quickly identified a country and segment with problems, and we calculated, we didn't guess, an initial distribution of the 10 heads we believe will be covered by that budget. So that's it. I've got a resource plan with data to support it and a solid base to start allocating the sales and marketing resource. Peter?
Thanks, Christine. Now, we've got a small amount of time for questions. You should be able to see a question box in your meeting window. So do use that to type in any questions you have. If we don't get a chance to answer your questions now, we'll follow up by email. Now, Christine, in fact, our first question arrived when you had that size growth chart on the screen. And the question is, would you add your own performance to the chart?
Interesting. I think the answer is maybe. Of course, you can take your own historic data, calculate the percentages, and put it on the chart. Some companies might do that, as it immediately shows you the difference between the market and your company's business. But it can be unfair. In the scenario we just looked at, for instance, Brazil is a startup country. So presumably the historic performance is near zero. So there'll be big gaps, but that's not a problem because it's a startup country. Other countries and industries may have less visible reasons for why their historic performance is different to the overall market. So to decide, you would need to know your own planning team well. If the people associated with underperformance are going to spend the rest of the meeting explaining the comparison was unfair, then I'd say no, don't do it. But there are teams who can use this information in a no-blame way. They just want to understand the market. If your planning team is like that, then yes, go for it. Plot the performance data alongside the market data.
Christine, thanks. We're coming to the end of the session, so I'm going to have to draw things to a close. We'll be in touch by email to answer the other questions. So it just remains for me, on behalf of Christine and myself, to say thank you all for taking the time to join this session. We look forward to welcoming you to our next webinar.